counselor and the host of the Facebook show, The Black Therapist. I'm also the owner of a new Facebook page called Neurodivergent Counselor Education Supervisors. It's for everyone who's a professional who's in the behavioral health field. So you could be a psychologist, you could be a social worker, you could be an addiction specialist, but it really is a place, a safe space for you to have a conversation, have a dialogue about what it's like to navigate as being neurodivergent. Now, I want to talk about something that's important to me. I'm all hyped up. Now, whenever you see me, you don't see me often anymore, but usually when there's something that I'm passionate about, like people know that I'm passionate about talking about trauma and healing. People know that I'm passionate about talking about couples navigating the journey of marriage or partnership or coupleship. I'm passionate about talking about neurodivergent and menopause. Now, one of the things I noticed recently is that I was reading an article that was an interview with Jennifer Aniston, who was in the show Friends. She was the one with the long hair. Everyone wanted to have her hairstyle in the 90s. And she talked about going for an eye exam. And during the eye exam, she realized that she wasn't seeing the letters the way they were on the chart. You know, the chart E, A, B. She was seeing the letters inverted. And this is when she was a star. So what they said to her was, well, you're seeing the letters backwards. Do you have any learning issues, any executive function issues? No. So that led her to be evaluated, and she discovered that she was dyslexic. But there are a lot of people who talk about being dyslexic, who were never diagnosed, who learned how to compensate and overfunction. Singer SZA, talked about, always feeling very sensitive, not wanting social media feedback because it would impact her mood, how she navigated throughout the world as a performer. And this recently, she was diagnosed, at this big age, of being over 25, as being autistic, being high functioning autistic. And a lot of women are high functioning autistic, and some men, but women especially because they don't have the features that you look at. They're very social. They are able to engage. They have friendships, right? The only thing about it is that there are times where they lack the nuances, the insight into those social things, where they may misinterpret something. They feel socially awkward. Sometimes they isolate when they can be connected. And they perseverate about one thing, and that can make you a genius at whatever you do. So if you're a singer, you might hyper focus on music and everything else falls apart. The room looks a mess, or your relationships aren't quite managed. But there's something that they hyper focus. If they're to animate, they can talk about that for hours and speak so quickly and so rapidly that they don't realize that the other person has said one thing. So there's some really, clear, definitive markers. But for a lot of people, they overlook it because they minimize it as she's just shy. She doesn't really talk a lot. Or she's really naive, or the person's an airhead, right? They make a disparaging remark. But they don't look close enough to see that there could be something that's different. Because for many people who saw movies such as Rain Man and some other shows, there's a stereotype of what an autistic person looks like, and people don't realize they come in different colors. There are different levels of autism. There's Asperger's, there's high functioning, there's so many. But for women especially, they get underdiagnosed because of the fact that people minimize it or trivialize it, or they make it as a personality trait, and that is something different. When Michelle Christet came out recently and spoke about being diagnosed with autism, she said, I never understood how when I was in class, people would, raise their hand and they just knew the answer. She said, I would just sit there wondering, how would they do that? And I would lose track of time because I was so curious about how they're doing this hyper focusing that she missed the material that was being taught. She said, I realize now, looking back, that I had all the features of having attention deficit disorder. I was inattentive, there were things that I missed. There were some really key factors that people looked at and didn't look at. They looked at the fact that she was quiet, that sometimes she would speak a lot, or that she just didn't know what to do sometimes, or didn't know the right words. And they said, oh, well, she's just sensitive, or she's just a deep thinker, right? Not realizing she had a jumbling stream of thoughts. She had problems organizing things, right? She didn't see the big picture. She saw small pictures, or sometimes she saw a picture too big. Those are all features. So there's a disproportionate number of women who go underdiagnosed. And then when they are diagnosed, they're late diagnosed. So can you imagine going through your whole life? It's like wearing glasses. not being able to see, but able to how to figure things out, not being able to see the words on the screen, but having to figure it out by the letters that you're able to form. That's what it's like to have a neurodivergent. Not knowing a name for it, like what SZA said was, now I know the name of it. There's relief when you know there's a name, there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is just different. You're not broken. You're not smart. You're not an airhead. You're not ditzy. There's nothing wrong with you. There's a name for it, right? There's a name for the thing that's impacting how you show up in the world and how you navigate in the world. And until you get that name, you make it be about you not being enough. And for a lot of people, they don't have any neurodivergent symptoms until something happens to them medically, whether it's, medical disorder or it's menopause. Because menopause, the fluctuation of the hormones will impact your executive functioning skills. What's that? Executive functioning is how you organize information. It's a prefrontal cortex. It's what you're thinking about, what you're thinking, how you're attending to, how you're noticing, how you're remembering it. And the biggest thing that happens with many of my clients is they'll say, Candace, I was the smartest person in the room. I could read tons of books, right? Like Oprah said, I started this book club because I was reading a book a day. And then she stopped the book club because she experienced menopause symptoms where reading didn't become fun. It became exhausting because it required so much focus. It became difficult to focus and attend and remember what she just read. She said, so reading became a trap for anxiety, for frustration. And she said, the double trap is that my body, which is really in great shape, started changing and I couldn't lose the weight. Right? There's a body betrayal, which is a medical trauma, and then there's a brain betrayal. So two organs are betraying me and are changing me from who I used to be. And people don't realize that those betrayals fill sometimes people with a sense of loss. It triggers grief, knowing that you're not who you used to be, that you're not as cognizant, your memory's not as good, right? And sometimes that feeling of grief becomes a feeling of shame. And shame is how you judge yourself negatively. So if you're like someone like SZA, you're like, I don't get why people, don't see why, I wasn't happy to see someone. I was still confused. There weren't enough cues for her to navigate in the room or the situation. So her response wasn't what people expected. And she couldn't figure out why that is, why that was. Like Michelle said, I couldn't figure out why people were so upset that I sang at Trump's first inauguration. I don't get it. She said, it didn't make sense to me. Everyone else got it. I didn't get it. She didn't realize what the message was. And especially when he got reelected and everyone showed up for his inauguration. Snoop Dogg, they made him offer to give her money to not perform. The first time he was elected was actually at his inauguration. She still didn't get it because she couldn't read the room and couldn't look at the political atmosphere had changed. Some things, some nuances were not there the second time that were there the first time. So it's important to look at, how women are underdiagnosed, and because they're underdiagnosed or they're late diagnosed, and late diagnosed means you're over 25. New diagnosis usually happens early in childhood. So when you're newly diagnosed as a child, what happens is you get diagnosed by a pediatrician, a psychologist, or a psychiatrist, or nurse practitioner diagnose you. Your teachers may complete a checklist. They create a student support team. They all talk about how are we going to help support this person? How are we going to help them be successful? A plan might be created. It might go to this. I broke my meditation bowl. I'm sorry about that. There might be a plan created. And they need more support. There might be a 504 plan created, which is an educational plan where during the life of this child, they may put things in place so they can be successful, like taking breaks, having a one-on-one instruction, giving chunks of information given to them, being able to get tutored or get direction from their teacher, right? People giving them breaks so they have lots of energy. They get to have breaks to go to the nurse station or to go to the counselor, but they are given accommodations. They themselves don't have to change. They don't have to be on medication. The environment around them changes so they can be supportive and successful at whatever they do. So that happens when you're a child, right? You get the option of having medication, not medication, going to therapy, not going to therapy. The environment changes so the child can be from pre-kindergarten all the way until college successful. What happens when you're underdiagnosed? You make it be about, I'm not working hard enough, so I'll work harder. You learn to master your symptoms so that people don't misinterpret the behavior, right? If you're a little girl, I want to be a good girl. You don't complain. You don't complain about struggles. You don't just complain about not being treated fairly because you're not understanding something. academically or socially, you just work harder. Or you try to be the nice girl so everyone likes you and you try to do people pleasing things. Or you try to fit in a mask, right? Or when people are around you and you're getting overstimulated, you don't complain about it. You make an excuse. Oh, my stomach hurts. Or let me clean up. Or let me do something else. You learn to mask and cope with things instead of complaining about things because women historically get rewarded by not complaining, by joining in, and we get connection through connection, right? We get intimacy through connection, not through complaining. We don't try to create conflict with people. We try to create connection with people so that the relationships thrive and that we feel safe and secure in those relationships. So, what do you think what happens when you've learned all these coping mechanisms as an adult and someone diagnoses you and you're 25, 35, 45, or you're in menopause 50? There are no accommodations for you to change. Sometimes there's shame because it's fear that what if they think I'm not enough? What if I'm in a leadership position and I can't ask for accommodations because there's shame? Because leaders stereotypically should be better than everyone else, should be stronger, should need help, right? So there's shame by asking for help as an adult, and you learn to live without the help. So the hardest thing is to say to people, now I need help. And that creates a thing about identity. Who do you think you were? Because sometimes we correlate identity with being the strong one, being the smart one is what I do. And when you ask for help, it gets perceived as internally in society as weakness, as not being enough. But going back to childhood, the kids who asked for help, who got the support, were not seen as not enough. But sometimes they were. They weren't supposed to be seen systematically by the educational system as not enough. But sometimes kids were seen as different. I know that I had one of my children had a hearing issue, and he did so well. He had an IEP because of a speech issue, a hearing issue, and by the time he got to middle school, IEP they gave him full all these benefits, and by the time he got to middle school, he's a straight A student. So what happened? This child was taken off of an IEP, which is a stronger plan, and given a 504 plan. By the time the child got to college, the child didn't want to have the plan. They wanted him to be normalized like everyone else and didn't really use their benefits or their accommodations. So what happens to women is that they learn that I don't want to be different. I want to blend in. I don't want to stand out. I don't want to create conflict. I don't want to be a bother to my supervisor. Or I don't want to disappoint my staff by asking for accommodations. But they suffer in silence. And they define the differences in them as being differences that equate to not being equal, not being enough. And if you're the strong person, the strongest person doesn't ask for help. Like Oprah said, she takes care of women because if you take care of the women, you take care of the whole community. And sometimes women don't often get an opportunity to say, I need help. I'm not feeling good. I'm not at my best. Right? There's an expectation for them to do something, whether it's just suck it up, take medication, or them to go to counseling, and then everything gets better. But the disparity between how late diagnosis or undiagnosed people who are neurodivergent are treated is so different from how children are treated who are neurodivergent. There are more accommodations, there's more support, right? There's more understanding. This is just, you just gotta live with that. It's like wearing glasses. You just gotta live with that. But what if the issue is not the disorder or the diagnosis? What if the issue is that we live in a society that doesn't always cater towards all disorders, all disabilities? And this is a disability that impacts how your brain is functioning, how it's organizing, how it's attending, how it's thinking, how it's processing, how it's recalling, how it's remembering things, right? I made a video yesterday about I couldn't find my keys. And my keys were around my neck on one of these lanterns because my car is a smart car. I don't need to put a key in the car. I just need to have my key in my car. But one of the things that happens is sometimes people see our symptoms, they think, okay, you're just being an airhead or you're just being irresponsible. And that really is, wait a minute, my brain is different. Like my eyes don't want to not see clearly. They just do. They changed when I was in my 40s. Prior to my 40s, I never wore glasses. And sometimes our neurodivergence comes prior to 40 when the body changes. And sometimes it's been with you the whole life. It just wasn't diagnosed. So you don't just make it part of who you are, but it's not who you are. It's how your brain is. So if you're someone who is neurodivergent, there's a place for you. There are lots of support groups for you. There are lots of groups on Instagram or LinkedIn. And I'm a specialist in neurodivergent professional women who are high striving, high achieving. And I'm also treating men also who are neurodivergent. And neurodivergence covers the gamut, right? It's dyslexia, it's ADHD, it's There's some dementias, it's Tourette's, it's all of those things. But when we hear neurodivergent, we just think ADHD, and that's not just it. It covers a lot of things, autism, Asperger's, all of that stuff. But if you are neurodivergent, I want you to know you're not alone. There are a lot of us. I want you to know that you're not the issue. Society is the issue. And there's nothing wrong with asking for help. The president has a chief of staff, has several advisors, right, who help this man. If you go to any religious institution, there are people surrounding the person who's a leader. That's their help. You're supposed to have help when you're doing great things. You're only human to take life one step at a time. Honor the difference in you and see it as your superpower. Because people who are neurodivergent, usually are very creative people. We think differently. We learn how to cope differently. We're able to see the color, not as black and white, but as a rainbow. And we have amazing energy, amazing optimism, and we're problem solvers. So honor your difference, honor your superpowers. And for everyone else, I want you to learn more about it. Ask a friend how I can support you. What can I do to help you? If you're a coworker or you're a supervisor, try to figure out what this person needs, right? Talk to them, not at them. If you're an administrator, an educator, give yourself permission to give the person an opportunity to talk about the accommodations they may need. Because sometimes in academia, the only accommodation is go to tutoring. That's it, go to coaching. But that's the environment, them having to do something, and the environment not changing in support of them. And we want everyone to be supported wherever you work at, wherever you live at. Thank you for spending time with me. Once again, I'm Candace R. Dickens. My website is CandaceRDickens.com. If you're looking for a clinician, I'm always looking for a client. I'm based in Ellicott City, but I'm duly licensed in DC and Maryland. So visit my website, CandaceRDickens.com. I offer free consultations, and we can just talk for an hour to see how I can help support you. Even if you don't become my client, you become my friend. Have an amazing day, everyone. Take care, like and share this video.